Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the Bug Bounty course, and in this episode we're talking about Burp Suite, how to use it, how to get the most out of it, what all the buttons do, and how I get set up for hacking. A lot of people have asked what my hacking setup is. I promise it's really easy. I don't tend to use a lot of third-party tools. I know a lot of people really love third-party tools. There is a few that I use, but primarily I hack just using Burp Suite, and I promise you really don't need anything other than Burp Suite. Later on in this series, we'll have a look at some other tools that you can use and look at things like some Burp add-ons that you can add to your Burp setup and start to customize it based on your way of hacking. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at both my Burp setup and the way I like to set up Firefox as well. Go through the key features of Burp and how I use all of the tools, and then finally ending with how I like to use each of these tools and what I think the way to get the most out of these tools are. So we have to thank our series sponsor. This series is very kindly sponsored by Bugcrowd. This series literally would not exist without them. Bugcrowd is the best place to get started with hacking, with a wide range of public and private programs, from APIs to desktop applications and everything in between. Not ready to jump into a public program yet? Fill out your platform CV, sign up for a waitlisted program, tell Bugcrowd a bit about your skills, previous certifications or experience, and they'll actually match you up with the right program using their industry-leading crowd match technology. Whatever your level, there is a place for you in the crowd. So what is Burp? So Burp is a proxy. Essentially, we man-in-the-middle attack ourselves. This sits between our web browser and the web server and allows us to edit requests, send new requests, and fiddle around with them. Fundamentally, all hacking is making small changes in the request. It might be changing a number from a positive number to a negative number. It might be changing an ID from one account to another. It might be changing the cookies from one value to another. It might be giving new cookies you've generated in some way. And I really like to think about it as kind of the hacking IDE. The same way programmers will use an IDE as their main way of interacting with a programming language, even though, yes, they could do it all in the terminal, they choose to because it kind of makes things really nice and easy, providing things like syntax highlighting, having built-in tools and add-ons that can make your workflow a lot more efficient. Now, Burp is not the only choice you have. There's a lot of other choices. OWASP, Zap, and Kaido are the ones the community probably uses the most. Burp is a really great one to start with because it is very standard. A lot of the tools are aimed for bug bounty hunters, and when you're ready, you can upgrade to the professional version. You don't need the professional version. I do not think that anybody who's watching this video needs to pay for that, but when you get more advanced, it's ready to come in with you, right? It's ready to join you on that next journey. But again, it's certainly not the only options, and certainly people do like OWASP, Zap, and Kaido, and if there is any demand, I will also make videos on how to get set up with them. As we'll see, I actually do have Zap set up, I just don't use it as much. So, you will need Firefox, or another web browser that you don't use as your main web browser, and Burp Suite Community Edition. We are going to set up Firefox as our hacking web browser, and then Burp Suite is going to be a hacking IDE. You don't need to pay for it. When you are ready to upgrade, you will know, and you will find it a very easy justification to make with the price. You do not need to pirate it. In fact, I would say if you're thinking, well, I'll just get the Burp scanner, I'll just pirate it, and then I'll pay for Burp when I get my first bounty, you're not going to find anything from the scanner necessarily. A lot of the advanced tools in there are things like Collaborator or extensions that rely on it. So my must-have extensions for Firefox. So first thing is 1Password or any password manager. That's because when you're hacking, you are going to have random accounts on random websites with random email addresses. You are not going to remember the passwords, especially if you jump from program to program. So what I like to do, as you can see here, this is my 1Password. I have the actual, in this case private, where my actual passwords are stored. I have a vault called hacking, and then the shared vault with people in my family. So in the hacking vault, I only enable that in Firefox. So passwords that I use in Firefox are only going to appear in Firefox, and I have that disabled in other web browsers. So it's not cluttering up my screen, but since I pay for 1Password anyway, I still get the benefits of that. Now, I will say you do not have to use 1Password. You can use Bitwarden or whatever. All we need to accomplish is have somewhere to store our passwords in. Next up is Foxy Proxy. So Foxy Proxy, which is this add-on here, allows you to switch on and off proxies really, really quickly. So if you're got Burp up, you can very quickly set up Burp or to not run through Burp. Super useful extension, and especially if you end up using other tools like OWASP Zap, you'll want this because you can use it to switch between Zap and Burp. Really, it's a single button. The next is Firefox Containers. So this is an add-on actually developed by Mozilla, and it essentially allows you to have each tab in a container so you can log into multiple accounts at once in different tabs. So if you use another web browser, let's say Chrome, if you log into Google on 2 tabs, you're logged into the same Google account, right? You can't log out in just one tab. Firefox Containers allow you to log out in just one tab. And this is really helpful when you start to test for access control issues or IDORs or BOLAs, whatever you want to call them, where you can have a separate tab for your admin user, a separate tab for your regular user, a separate tab for you not being logged in. And then you can very quickly test issues without having to mess around with cookies or sessions and stuff like that. Really recommend it. Fantastic add-on. And the other one I like is called Cookies Quick Manager. Now, you can actually view and edit your cookies in most web browsers now. So this is, I guess, unnecessary. But Cookies Quick Manager is a great add-on for just looking through cookies, being able to search through cookies, seeing whether or not they're HTTP-only cookies, etc., etc. Super useful, really recommend it. So let's get started in actually setting up a brand new Firefox web browser as our hacking web browser. Okay, so this is a brand new installation of Firefox. In the background, you can see I've got Burp running. So the first thing we need to do is to download the add-on Foxy Proxy. So I'm going to go here and search for Foxy Proxy. And then I'm just going to get Foxy Proxy Standard, add to Firefox, add. Cool. Now Foxy Proxy is in here. So let's set this up to work with Burp. So I'm going to click on Options, and it's going to say you do not have any proxy settings. Click Add to start. And I'm going to go to Add. So I'm going to call this Burp, and I might call it Burp Community. It doesn't really matter. It's just a name. It's going to appear up here, so just make sure it's something identifiable. It's going to ask for the proxy IP address or DNS name. So you're going to go into Burp, you're going to go into Proxy, and then you go into Proxy Settings. So here you can see, okay, the IP address is 127.0.0.1, and the port is 8080. And then you're just going to press Save. Bam, done. So here, now when we click on it, we can see turn off use Firefox settings or Burp Community. Now, if I click on Burp Community and I try and access anything, it's going to say software is preventing Firefox from safely connecting to this site. So to solve this problem, what we need to do is we need to install Burp certificate. So you're going to go to http://burp, and it's going to say welcome to Burp Community Suite Edition. Then you're going to download this CA certificate. You're then going to go back into your setting, which I do not have open, and you're going to look up certificates. So view certificates. Now you're going to press this button that says import, and then you're going to trust this CA, press OK, and then we shall see if we go back to trying to load up Google. Now it's working. So essentially all of our traffic is now going into Burp, and we can see this by going to HTTP history and making sure this is sorted downwards. So this is the most recent one first. So I'm going to click this again, and you can see it's loading up everything from Burp. Now if we click on these, we can see the actual request and response. And I'm just going to set mine up to be side by side because that's how I like it. So we still need to get a few more add-ons. The next add-on we're going to grab is going to be 1Password. We're also going to grab Firefox Containers and add those. And finally, we're going to add Quick Cookies. and I'm using Cookie Quick Manager and add this. Okay, so I'm just going to very quickly set up my 1Password. So I'm all set. I'm then the settings here, and then I'm going to scroll all the way down and make sure just hacking is enabled and that I'm saving all my items into hacking. So that way now when I press 1Password, I can't see all of my other passwords. So great. 1Password is now set up. I'm just going to click on the container icon, and all I'm going to do is delete these existing ones. You can see how it's got that little blue bar. It means it's loaded up in a container. So I'm just going to delete all the existing ones because I would like to just call mine admin, regular user, and logged out. So I'm going to start with admin. And for some reason I think admins are red. I'm going to make another one called logged in. I'm going to make that green. And I'm going to make the final one here logged out. I'm just going to make that blue. And now when I click on my containers, I'll have admin, logged in, logged out. So cool. And finally, Cookies Quick Manager. I don't need to do any setup. You can see it's already loaded it all up. And that's really all you need to do to get started getting set up with your hacking browser. I promise it's really not that difficult. Another great add-on, if you are looking at what other tools can I use, is WAP Analyzer. That will show you what technology something is doing under the hood. But for the moment, I really just recommend those 4 extensions. Foxy Proxy, some code manager, I'm using 1Password, Firefox containers, and Cookies Quick Manager, just so you can easily see the cookies. And as you can see, as I've been doing stuff, Burp has been filling up. So that is my setup for Burp. Okay, great. So that is my hacking setup, but how do you actually use this tool? Like, I've shown you how to get it set up, but what next? Well, let's have a talk about what Burp Suite looks like and how to actually use it. So I've got my Burp Suite back open here and I'm on the main page. Now the main page is primarily an advertisement for Burp Suite Pro. So Burp Suite Pro has issues on it. It has a scanner basically. Now if you close this, you realize that half of it disappears and there's really only 2 key tools in here. So the first thing here is the event log. Now the event log is really helpful for telling you if there are any issues. Now the most common issue you will see is certificate pinning. So if you're working with a mobile device, for example, they will pin the certificate so the Burp certificate can't overwrite it and it can't man in the middle attack you, even though you want it to. You actually have to disable that with something called Frida and a script. But if it isn't working, you will see it here. It'll be the client failed to negotiate a TLS connection. So if you are ever having any problems in Burp, this is where you'll find it. And then this is the passive crawl. So the way Burp works is even if you haven't visited, say, Google Images, because there's a link to Google Images, right? The link is whatever, google.co.uk image HP. It still exists, but you just haven't visited it. And what Burp's passive crawl will do is collect those URLs and then show them to you. So that we'll see this when we open up our target page, and you can see these are all the domains we've visited. Now, if I open up Google, you can see that there's ones that are in black and ones that are in grey. Now, the grey is what Burp has seen from the live passive crawl, and the grey is the black is what you've actually visited. So it's not too important to switch on and off. You may want to do it if you're working maybe with a more sensitive client. I don't know. I've never actually switched it off. I've always just kept it on. I don't find that it's particularly distracting, though I will say it's never been particularly helpful either. Very helpful in CTFs though. In CTFs, there tends to be hidden stuff in like links that are hidden on the page. In an actual hacking situation, I haven't really found it to be that helpful. But this is showing you everything you've visited by URL. Now you can see here there are little folder icons. I cannot stress enough that these folders do not actually exist. Like maybe 10, 15 years ago, yes, there were actual folders and in there was actual files, But nowadays, because everything uses what's called routing, you just won't see these in a real web application, especially a more modern one. Maybe you see one in an older one, I guess. And you can see here that it has this file structure approach. Now, I personally don't really find this helps me, but you may well find this helps you. Now, when we're often working in a bug bounty situation, we often have a limited scope. And what scope means is that's what we're allowed to attack. That's what the client has permitted us to attack. That's what we're going to get paid a bounty for, right? We don't get paid a bounty if we go out of scope. Now, as you can see, I've got stuff here from Google Analytics and from Watchtower, from 1Password and ad service. And if I'm just attacking google.com, I may only want to see things from google.com. So if you go into scope settings, use advanced scope control, then you go back to here, right click, add to scope. I'm going to press no. Now, if we check here, we can see that we've added this to our target scope. Now, if we wanted to also add subdomains, we just need to edit this. And this is regex, regular expressions. So I'm going to do a dot anything, and I'm going to remove the literal dot. So this will be anything google.com. Press OK. Now, if I go into my filter, I'm going to show only in-scope items. And you can see here that a bunch of stuff will now be removed apart from the subdomains of google.com. So google.com, play.google, ogs.google, adservice.google. And this is really helpful. Now, sometimes clients may have Burp scope control that you can actually download. However, sometimes you won't. And I think this pattern of just whatever their main domain name is, .com, and then getting any subdomains works for the most part, right? So the next thing we have is the proxy. Now, the first thing that happened when I actually started up Burp was intercept was on. And intercept stops the request from being sent until you've played around with it. So if you press forward, it will forward it. If you press drop, it will drop it and not forward it onwards. Now, the idea here is that you can edit this. So maybe we change, this says maybe that's for integer. So if I change that to an F for float, what happens? Maybe nothing. Now, if you go into the actions, you can also click on do intercept response. So you can also see what the response is. Maybe you change this to just be a C and forward it. And then when the response comes, it will also forward you the response here. So anywhere you click on in Burp, including in here, you'll see you've got the request and then the response to this request. You can right click on any request and send it to any of the tools in Burp. And primarily you're going to be using the tool repeater. So I'm going to switch intercept off and go into HTTP history. So HTTP history is the same data that's showing in target, but instead of by website or domain name, it's sorted by time. Now, I find this the easiest way to consume this information. I really like to see it in this because I really do work with clicking a button. What happens when I click that button? So that really works for me. This is where I spend most of my time. And again, it's the same idea. I'm going to be here, send to repeater, go in here, send to repeater, whatever. Now I'm going to skip over Intruder and move to repeater. So if I right click on this, send to repeater, this allows me to repeat the request. Now I can repeat the request without any changes. I'm just going to change it so it's side by side. And we can see we get a 302 issue. Maybe I try editing it though. And I'm just going to remove this cookie here. And I'm going to send it again and see whether or not it's changed. So what I'm really looking for when I'm hacking is making a change on this side to get some response that's different. Now I'm getting a 204 error. Not necessarily vulnerable, doesn't really mean anything, but maybe if I understood what I was looking at, I would go, oh, that implies this about the website. There's no access control. You can also label these as well by double clicking on them and name them. So what I will usually do is I will pick some action. Maybe it's have an item, put it in my cart, check it out. and I will send each of those requests to repeater so I can see every single request step by step. I don't tend to use inspector at all. I just tend to just read the requests. But when you're first getting started out, this can be super helpful in giving you the correct technical terms to Google. So when we look at request header accept, you can Google HTTP request header accept and get some information about it. I personally find it's just easier to read it, though I am aware that you will not necessarily find it easier. We have Burp Collaborator as a tab. This is not something that's available on the free version. It is a really cool tool. It's great for SSRF. I am going to be talking about how to get the features of Burp Collaborator when we get there, but don't worry about it. It's not a major tool. You don't have to worry about it. I'm going to skip over sequencer and go straight to decoder. So decoder allows you to encode and decode different pieces of text. Now, this is really helpful when you're dealing with things like special characters, because special characters will be encoded in a different way, and you can also go back into repeater and automatically convert this to things like HTML encodable characters, for example. Very helpful if you are when you're using repeater, trying to figure out what payload you actually need to put together. We then have comparer, so this allows us to compare two requests. So if I go back to repeater, I right click here, send to comparer, I go backwards, send to comparer, and now when I press when I press words, it will show me the difference between the two. So in this case, I'm getting redirected somewhere, but all the other headers are the same apart from the time. You can also do a byte level comparison, but I've never found this to be particularly helpful in doing bug bounties, so it's whatever. Logger shows you all of the logs. It's pretty straightforward, and extensions allows you to add additional tools in. Now, in terms of add-ons that I really like, I'm going to go over this in more detail. I really like Authorize, Logger++, QL, and Breeder, but that's very much depending on my hacking style. There's a lot of different add-ons that do lots of different things. If you're just trying to get the best ones, sort by popularity, and you can see what other people really like. So you can see we've got Turbo Intruder, JSON Web Tokens, Paraminer, HTTP Request Smuggler. Now, I did skip over Intruder, so we're going to go back to Intruder here. And we're going to start by just sending something that has some data. So Intruder is a brute forcing tool. So I'm going to right click here, send to Intruder. And you can see here that it's loaded up into this UI. So each one of these green boxes with the little simoleon / paragraph symbols is what's called an insertion point. So that's where your payloads are going to get inserted. So the first thing you'll usually do when you use this tool is clear burps. It tries, it's not very good. And then you want to select what you actually want to change. So maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's going over here, highlighting this TID, and then add a little simoleon symbol, and then it will add just a single insertion point. Now, there's a lot of different brute forcing tools in Burp Suite. So the first is Sniper. Sniper is a single set of payloads, and it will try each payload in each insertion point. So if you have 2, it's going to go through this one first. So everything, maybe you do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it will do 1, 2, 3, 4 in this one. Battering ram uses a single set of payloads again, and it does it all at the same time. So it will set both of these to be 1, then both of them to be 2, then both of them to be 3, then both of them to be 4, and both of them to be... Pitchfork uses 2 different payload sets, so maybe a username and a password, and then it will iterate through the first password and the first username, then the second password, then the second username, then the third password, then the third username. And Cluster Bomb will iterate through every single password for every single username, every single password for the second username, every single password for the third username, etc. Honestly, the thing you'll probably use it the most for is fuzzing. So you probably want to keep it on sniper and stick to a single insertion point. Now, what do you actually want your payloads to be? So there's a few options here of doing things like generating numbers or dates or recursive grep. This is all stuff we're going to be doing a bit later when we start to talk about really getting the most out of this tool. You'll mostly want to keep to a single list. Now, if you go to payload all the things, so payload all the things is a GitHub repository that has a lot of fuzzing already in there. So if I go to SQL injection and I go to Intruder and I go to generic fuzz, or actually maybe generic time-based instead, because that's a bit more interesting. I can go to raw and I'm going to copy it all. I'm going to press paste and it will load in all of those example payloads for me. Now, you can't just run this and then immediately know when you found something. So the difficult part about using this is picking the right tool and treating this as fuzzing and the right payload set and treating it as fuzzing, not treating it as your own personal scanner. And again, we'll go over more of the payload processing in detail in a future video. We can start the attack, press OK, and then it's just gone to the other side. So now we can see that it's actually run all of these, and we might do some attack from it. Like maybe we say, actually, this is vulnerable, this is not vulnerable. If you if you go to columns, you can actually get more columns, including things like the response received and response completed, which can give you an idea of things like time-based issues. Again, super useful tool, probably something best used for fuzzing as you're getting started, but a really cool thing to really learn in detail, especially when you start to look at some of these like recursive grep, because you can actually extract from a response and then use it to extract all the data. It's a very, very cool option. And then finally, we've got the settings. So we have proxy settings. The main thing you might want to add to these is match and replace rules and add a header with your Bugcrowd username in, for example. You also have the scope option. And what you may want to change is things like the user interface to make it a bit larger if you struggle to see or you have any other accessibility issues. And yeah, that is Burp. It's a really simple, straightforward tool, but it really is like your hacking IDE. So it's really important to learn it and learn it well, especially because there's just so many tools. So that is how to use Burp and how to get fully set up. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really look forward to seeing you next time. Over the week, please do have a go at using Burp and getting stuck in, because it really is a really great tool, but it takes some practice, right? Try some CTFs, try it out, try it on a real target, look at what a real website looks like, get a feel for how this tool works. So thank you very much, everybody, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.